All right, and welcome, fight fans, to another episode of Before the Bald Man Speaks. I'm your host, as always, Andrew the Clown Kid Lawrence. Sorry for the delay in getting started today. We will be joined later on in this post-fight show for UFC 197 with Canada's favorite son, James Lynch. James Lynch is caught up in a little bit of a technical snafu as we speak. It is getting resolved. We'll have him, call in as soon as he's ready. Beforehand, if any of you have questions out there for the show, make sure you hit us on the hashtag BTBMS, and we will answer your questions throughout the show. Hopefully, James will join us soon, and we won't miss too much of his coverage, because I know a lot of people are excited to hear exactly what he had. What do you have to say after a very interesting and at points awkward main event between Jon Jones and Ovince Saint Preux? I think it's no question that there's no question that Jon Jones was supposed to be more impressive in this fight. I believe he was such a heavy favorite, and there's so much involved in a Jon Jones return fight, in the excitement of a Jon Jones fight. We've just grown accustomed to seeing such spectacular violence from the man that I think we were all taken aback a bit by how things worked out, especially in the first 3 rounds. Kind of the tale of rounds 4 and 5 were Jon Jones returning to form. But once again, hit us up on the hashtag BTBMS. Ask some questions, and we'll talk about your questions before we're joined by the man himself, James Lynch. Interesting. You know, if you had told me in these two, the co-main event and the main event spots, who was going to get the finish and who was going to get go to a 5-round decision, I clearly believe it would have been flipped. We'll save a lot of the Jon Jones talk for James, but I did want to talk on the top a little bit about the co-main event and how shocked I was by the first-round knockout by Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson. Really a spectacular knockout and a real good finish. It's almost flying under the radar right now, but it's come to be an expectation, at least in my mind, that Mighty Mouse is getting these finishes in the title fights. You can say what you want about the level of competition. I think that this fight clearly showed the inexperience of Henry Cejudo, but we'll get back to him and focus on DJ for a little bit here. But if you look at, these last couple fights, he's becoming more and more ruthless, and it may be the case that Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson here is growing and evolving as a fighter and becoming more dangerous and more deadly. So that only spells more bad news for the 125-pound division. Yeah, shout out to Flying Brian and the Flying Brian squad. Yep, T-shirts in the house. Literally, someone went and picked up the UPS package and gave it to me in the middle of the fight, so I was excited to see it. Fantastic night of fights. Not a great night for underdogs. Everyone who watches this show knows that I praise the underdog bets, and I'm a huge lover of betting the dogs. Only 2 underdogs come through on the night. The one that sticks out and should stick out in everyone's head is Edson Barboza over Anthony Showtime Pettis. What was most interesting in this fight was I thought that if Edson Barboza were to win, he would win somehow in the scrambles or in some sort of exchanges or catch the proverbial lucky punch. But really what we saw here throughout the entire 3-round fight was Edson outclassing Anthony Pettis. I know that a lot of people had it 29-28. I had it 30-27 straight away. I thought that Edson Barboza's game plan, I thought that his angles, I thought that his ability to judge distance was better. He just proved himself to be the most elite Muay Thai, most elite stand-up guy in the 155-pound division. At least in my case, I understand what people would say with an argument for, the champion RDA. But what I'm saying is, from a straight kickboxing Muay Thai stand-up perspective, he may be the most dangerous and deadly guy. So that was very interesting to see Edson Barboza kind of coming into his own and really taking this opportunity in a big showcase fight to put the biggest win of his career on the board. We got a question here from the man himself, Nick Baldwin. He says, when did Lynch on Sports move ahead of Brian and I in the rankings of Canadian Sons' favorite rankings? James Lynch has always been Canada's favorite son. You were never even close to being on the board, Nicholas. I'm sorry. That's just the case. Flying Brian, you're making a great case for yourself, but I still haven't seen any free beer flown my way. Once the packages of beer start arriving on my Brooklyn doorstep, then we can get you in contention here for Canada's favorite son. But I'm sorry, you're just being out impressed. Well, you're basically being out dressed and out impressed by the man himself, James Lynch, who should be on in the next 10 minutes or so. Breaking down this card, like I was saying, a lot of favorites here, so there's not too many surprises. A lot of where we saw some unexpected things happen in this card was just how close and competitive a few of these fights were, or at least that we had some early success with some of the fighters, and it kind of didn't fade for them, and it didn't hold up. But we had some unexpected early results and or some unexpected parts early in the fights that ended up being comebacks for fighters. A great fight to start off the pay-per-view, Yair Rodriguez against Andre Fili. In fact, the first two fights that started off the pay-per-view, including Robert Whittaker over Rafael Natal, were really showcase fights. Going into them, I think a lot of people thought they would be fairly competitive. And even the commentary from Goldie and Rogan thought that implied that the Fili and Rodriguez fight was a lot more competitive than I thought it was. I thought this was a showcase for Yair Rodriguez. I really saw him dominating all facets of the range game. He just determined where this fight was going to be fought at. He said, I'm going to keep it at this kicking range that I feel very comfortable in. He had to fight off a very minimal amount of strikes from that range once he was able to institute that long-range fighting. He wasn't forced into any spots really where he was at a disadvantage or where he was, in danger or taking any real significant shots, and was able to land techniques. Now, were they spaced out by a lot of time? Yes. But what it did was it allowed him to analyze Andre Fili's game, and clearly Fili's game was not at the same level when it comes to the stand-up. And it allowed him to kind of pick apart his movement and see where he will be and where he likes to move if he attacks in certain ways. And when that clean left landed and really rocked and probably blurred Andre Fili's vision, that's where he was able to capitalize on it. So it was this whole long process kind of for Yair Rodriguez. But for me, it seemed like he was setting him up the entire time, and it kind of all came to an end with that head kick. With that roundhouse kick, flying roundhouse kick finish. Fantastic highlight reel. And in a great job by the UFC to take a fighter like that, put him in a place where he has a big opportunity to make a name for himself and really make a statement. Yair Rodriguez is a really young guy. He's training at a great camp now. And I think that when Tough Latin America came out, there was some obvious cynicism out there in the fan base. With good reason, I think there was a lot of subpar talent. But what's great is we have got a lot of these, especially from a lot of these international shows. Maybe the whole batch of talent wasn't so great, but the champions who came out of those fights have been just really spectacular. Another person that this applies to, of course, is the second fight of the pay-per-view, and Robert Whittaker. Couldn't have landed more power shots if he tried, if I tried, if everyone in the UFC had tried. Goddamn, Rafael Natal was eating every single shot that was being thrown out there tonight. He, despite having clearly a technical and athletic deficit in this fight to overcome, he hung tough and stayed with it. I really and truly believe that everyone else in that 185-pound division falls down and goes out to the performance that Robert Whittaker. I mean, I'm not saying everyone, but the vast majority of 85-pounders there are going to go to sleep after those barrage of punches from Robert Whittaker. It was just a seriously dominating performance from Whittaker, and probably Australia's next best chance at having a title contender, someone who can actually have a possibility of wearing the UFC gold around his waist. So we talked about the two guys who opened the card, and I do want to save the main event and talk a little bit about that once Mr. James Lynch comes onto the show. I will segue and say also that in the boxing world, Triple G just absolutely annihilated Dominic Wade here in the second round. 3 knockdowns, and they were brutal. It didn't even seem like a fight. Fantastic for those of us who actually love the boxing. I'm not the biggest boxing fan in the world, but I really would encourage people who are fans of MMA to check out Triple G. He is a special fighter and probably one of these once in a lifetime guys for our generation. So you should enjoy him and try to check him out when he does fight. He kind of snuck in during the Anthony Pettis fight, so I missed a couple minutes of the tail end of Pettis Barboza to go check out the Triple G highlights because that did not take him long to get it done. We'll talk about the undercard for a little bit here, and we'll start off with the younger Pettis, the successful Pettis brother today. Pettis, he kind of edges out Kalidas in a unanimous but not very dominating fashion. He was just a little bit better in all the rounds. Very reminiscent of one of these cases. The famous case I always remember is Jose Aldo against Chad Mendes, where it's a very competitive fight and all the rounds are very competitive, but at the end of the day you have to score each of those individual rounds to, well, in this case, Sergio Pettis, and in that case, Jose Aldo. So while the scorecard at the end ends up reading 30-27 or as a sweep, the fight wasn't as close as that. The Canadian here, Chris Kalidas, really had a really good showing and showed that he's a person who belongs in the 125-pound division. I actually believe that this was a great come-out fight for Sergio. He's young, and these fighters who live in the shadow of their brothers, not everyone's going to have their moment like Nick Diaz, or Nate Diaz, rather. You see, the exact problem I'm referencing there. But Sergio looked good here. It looked like his fighting game is evolving. He looked more comfortable in the cage. I just really don't think he's going to make it to that elite level. 125 pounds. I mean, look at the performance we just saw put in by Mighty Mouse Johnson. Good Lord, people. You're not going to be able to withstand that with the technique and skill set that Pettis has, Sergio there. Another decent fight in the undercard, Dominic Steele against Danny Roberts. Danny Roberts takes a unanimous decision in somewhat controversial fashion, in my opinion. I had the score rounds 1 and rounds 3 to Dominic Steele, and I had the second round to Danny Roberts. Non-stop action-packed Dominic Steele was less successful when he was going for the action fight, and more successful when he was able to take control of the cage and really work his head fighting, really work his clinch game. And I thought that he did that enough in the third round to make a difference. I might concede that the harder shots were landed by Danny Roberts, but I don't think they were. I think that the edge given to Dominic in the third round, because of his work in the clinch for nearly 3 minutes controlling the fight, that outweighs the slight edge I would have given Danny for the stand-up in the round. I just ultimately thought that Dominic did more, was more effective with his technique in that third round, and I split the two. Of course, I split it 1 to Dominic Steele and 2 to Danny Roberts. But a good introduction to the UFC for Danny Roberts. I don't really understand why Dominic Steele is the opening opponent for it, and I worry that once he progresses in the UFC, he's going to have a harder and harder time against names, that seem to be a little bit bigger and people with a little bit more technique under their belt than Steele. That will be a problem going forward. Hopping on the tube, seeing how long it is until we get some James Lynch in our lives, ladies and gentlemen. We are in a passive mode while we wait. For Mr. Lynch. Okay. Seems like it's just going to be a couple more minutes for James. We could go down. You know what? Let's do this. Let's start and cover some of these fights that I never end up covering. Let's talk about the card as a whole. Sorry, change of plans. some interesting things from the UFC in general for the UFC 197 here. The virtual tail of the tape. We had a lot of extra production value in the card. There was the three-dimensional effects of people. When they do the tail of the tape, usually it's a flat graphic posted up, two fighters' photos side by side. We had an experiment within the crowd, kind of three-dimensionalized virtual reality tail of the tape. I like things like that, and I like that the UFC is willing to and trying to bring the next level to the production value. I don't think this was very successful, but I do appreciate them actually making attempts to make changes and innovate. Also, having DC Daniel Cormier in the booth, I've been a big supporter of three men in the booth for quite a while. I think having a fighter in particular in the booth helps rein in Joe Rogan a little bit and helps focus his commentary and keeps him more actively in his lane where he's more successful. So I really like having Daniel Cormier or Bryant Stan in that three-person booth. I know a lot of people used to criticize Showtime Boxing for their for a crowded booth and having three commentators, and sometimes there'd be some crosstalk. But I thought that the guys were really successful here, and that having a third person in there kind of reins in all the insanity that can surround a Goldberg and Rogan booth. And there was quite a lot of commentary and insanity happening during this entire thing. There was really a lot of commentary that was just really, really misleading from Rogan. A couple fights where I thought that he was clearly scoring fights incorrectly, and we'll get to those later. But I do appreciate, from a production standpoint and from someone who watches all of these cards and all of these fights on a regular basis, that we want to see some variety in the shows and we want to see some distinction. So why can't we experiment with new things like adding people to the booth, different production quality? And I'm glad to see the UFC is kind of coming around to that. Speaking of interesting pieces and parts of the show from the commentary booth, Goldie at the beginning of the show unceremoniously announces that UFC 200 will be headlined by Jon Jones against Daniel Cormier, only to retract it both on the FS prelims later on in the day and in the pay-per-view section of the show. Really curious, in my opinion, whether or not he actually meant to, or whether he was instructed to do this by the UFC, or if Goldie was kind of off the rails or just, going down one of his turns. Seems like we're being joined pretty soon by Mr. James Lynch. But I'd be very interested to know whether the production team was in his ear telling him that he was to make that announcement, or whether that was something he decided to freestyle. Let's take a moment now. We'll rewind. We'll go back to the beginning of the card because we're joined by our guest today. You know him from his work on MMA Oddsbreaker. You know him from being the best interview man in MMA. You know him for being the most handsome Canadian in the goddamn world. His name's James Lynch. Lynch on Sports. How you doing, brother?
Doing fantastic. Apologies for the delay. I don't know what was going on with the internet over there, but I'm here. We're ready to talk some fights. Thank you for having me on the show.
Word on the street was you were in like a Neverland-style ranch earlier today, right? You were in kind of
Yeah, kind of. I was at Robin Black's house actually. So it's yeah, you can call it whatever you want, but the Wi-Fi there just wasn't as adequate. But I made it home. Props to my wife. She drove really fast, and I got here, and we're ready to do this. So it's all good.
First of all, super props to the wife. Stress driving is a skill. Let's throw that out there. And two, I think that Robin Black's just too spiritual of a guy to have Wi-Fi at his place. He can't be bogged down by things like the internet,
Absolutely, absolutely. Give me 1 second. I'm going to just switch over to my computer. I just turned it on. Watch this. I'm going to do a little hang up here and a little join here. Watch. It'll take 2 seconds.
All right, awesome. I can cover 2 seconds of time. I think I'm a master of that. And for those of you watching this on Google Hangout, actually, you get a really nice sneak peek of James Lynch wearing a suit and tie. Compare this man in this photograph right here to the man you're about to, have in a video conference. This photo is a lie, my friends. People of the internet, I give you this photo. It is a lie. It is a sham. This man is not a suit and tie man. This man is a Canadian badass. He's a Rush roadie in spirit. Really, despite the awkwardness of the main event of this fight, guys, I was actually very pleased with how the whole card worked out. I enjoy, some people were complaining about the prelim fights, and there was parts of the prelim fight, specifically the 115-pound fight. Let's be honest with Carlos Esparza, was a real down moment in the entire card. But overall, I found this card to be extremely entertaining. And the weirdness of the main event only adds the entertainment from me. And we're joined once again by the man.
Sorry about that. If we're going to do this, we got to do it in HD, right? So I'm back, and I wanted to show off my T-shirt too. I got a Bolo Young shirt from Bloodsport that I had to show off tonight.
Nicely done.
So there we go. But yeah, I'm back and ready to go. Apologies again for everything.
No, stop apologizing so much. It's so Canadian of you. You're such a polite, nice guy. We're happy to have you on the show, man. I'm really glad that you could fit me into your busy schedule. I'm sad that I pulled you away from the legendary land of Robin Black, my friend.
No, it was good. We watched a lot of fights and everything, but it was end of the night. It felt kind of, like I said, the Wi-Fi wasn't working. Felt kind of bad. I was hanging out at his house. I was kind of squatting, right? So had to just zoom home and do it up. So we're here and we're ready to go.
Yeah, it makes sense. I've had to host this show from some awkward locations in my time, so I feel you. Let's get right into it, man.
Yeah.
The main event here, Jon Jones dominates, but still feels like it was a lackluster performance.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people compliment this, and I've seen a lot of people really poo-poo this and say that today, DC would have ran this version of Jon Jones all over that octagon. Where do you land on this? What do you think went wrong, or did anything go wrong?
I think styles make fights. I think you saw that Jon struggled in the fight with Alexander Gustafsson, a fighter who was around the same size as him. I think that when Jones fights guys that are his size, it's not the same fight. I think people to think and sit there and say that Daniel Cormier is going to be, destroy Jon Jones. I just don't buy that. I think it's just the fact that it's styles make fights. I think OSP is an interesting style. Yes, Glover went out there and destroyed OSP, but is Glover the same guy as Jon Jones? He's not. So for me, I think it's just the fact that, again, OSP is a bit of an awkward style. Jones had the layoff. Jones is fighting a guy his size. A decision, not too surprising. I mean, a lot of people felt like he was going to finish, but for me personally, pound for pound, I think that Jones getting a decision is not too surprising if I'm thinking about it, right? So,
yeah, earlier this week, Luke Thomas, sorry. Luke Thomas reminded me that, or was talking about, what you were talking about and how styles make fights. But he was talking about how Jon Jones has progressed from kind of an instinctual, organic fighter who used, street techniques and just kind of raw power and athleticism into a more technical fighter. I really believe that Jon Jones has become this a fighter who needs a game plan, who needs to work towards a specific opponent. Maybe it's just the symptom of being a champion for so long. And when you're the champion, you're kind of not just training all techniques. You're kind of training to win that next fight, maybe more selectively. So I believe the 3-week layoff kind of hurt Jon Jones in an ability to game plan for a southpaw, really.
Yeah.
That's a major thing that I think we're overlooking here, and I kind of forgot about until this fight started. I said, oh, shit, of course OSP fights southpaw. That changes a lot of what you'd be planning and drilling for, an 8-week camp.
Right, exactly. And let's think about the variables here. Jones had the time, the layoff, 400 and something days. Again, he's fighting a guy who's, again, a bit awkward for the division. I mean, look at OSP and look at the rest of the division. Is there a lot of fighters like him? Not really. So, that in itself is a bit of a challenge. And, Jones, again, the pressure that he had going into this fight, the outside stuff, being the former champ, again, fighting a new opponent. These are all things that we have to consider in this. I don't look at this fight and say Jon Jones is rusty or Jon Jones is this and that. I say we'll know more when he fights DC in the rematch, and that will be the true test of who Jon Jones really is. So that's all I got to say on that. I wasn't too, to be honest, he just did what he had to do. I wasn't sitting there saying like, oh my God, Jon Jones has lost a step. Not at all. I just feel like, the guy's had a layoff. We'll see how he is in the next fight. Next fight, I think, is the fight you can judge.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's looking like they're doing that rematch with Daniel Cormier, of course. But it more looks like they're aiming for it for UFC 200.
Yeah.
You might have heard me mention it briefly. I kind of touched on it, but I left it alone. Goldie just kind of dropped this in the middle of the prelims. I think it was even the Fight Pass portion of the card. Just casually said that UFC 200 was going to be headlined by Daniel Cormier and Jon Jones. Should Jon Jones win this fight? What do you think? He ended up backing off of it in the in the Fox Sports and
yeah, because some producer was probably in his ear being like, Mike, you got to be quiet about these things, right?
Do you think that was just a total fuck up by Mike?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
You know, look at Mike tonight. He seemed a bit off, and you know, I don't want to insinuate anything, but he looked like maybe he's having some extra things, you know, in the broadcast tonight. It didn't. He looked. I mean, just go back and look at the broadcast and look at his eyes. It did not seem like he was all there. So I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to get any lawyers after me, but he just, you know, he didn't look himself. Well, let me just leave it.
Yeah, you can say that. A fantastic clip out there is circulating of him pronouncing Joanna Jędrzejczyk. It sounded like Stephen Hawking's like robot computer, had a couple typos while pronouncing that name when he laid it out there. It's always been interesting, but this time it was particularly interesting. A lot of weird fuck ups.
But getting back to your question, yeah, I think that's sort of the plan. I mean, with Conor, you know, being off this card, I don't see Conor getting put back on this card. You know, I think the UFC is kind of looking at this Conor thing and being like, you know what, if Conor's on the card, yeah, it's going to do great numbers. If Conor's off the card, it's still probably going to do decent numbers just with the fact you have so many fights on there. Yes, it's not sexy. Doesn't have the sizzle, so to speak, as you know, a lot of people like to say, but it's a card that people will tune in for. It's UFC 200. There will be people going that week to check out the card. I think you spread the wealth a little bit. You put Conor on like UFC 201, 202 around there, and that way you're guaranteed 1 million buys with Conor. So you're probably, maybe you're not guaranteed 1 million buys with UFC 200, but at least you're getting close to that number because you do have the title fight with Tate. You know, you throw Jones on there, people are going to tune in. Jon Jones is still a big star, so I think, you know, I think it's still a win-win for the UFC.
Yeah, I think Jon Jones for 200 is a no-brainer. I think that he likes fighting in Vegas as opposed to Conor, who's kind of been more and more vocal about not liking that trip. Maybe New York suits Conor better later on in the year if it does take that long for the UFC and him to come to their or to resolve their differences. Ultimately, when we talk about this main event and kind of summarize what we feel about it, I still walk away thinking Jon Jones is the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world and the greatest fighter that I've ever seen. I do not choose him to beat Daniel Cormier or I do not choose Daniel Cormier to beat him in a rematch. I think that this is just going to be more of the same and maybe even a more emphatic beatdown by Jones this time. Are we on the same page here, James?
Yeah, we are. And you know, I don't you know, the pound for pound thing's kind of a bit subjective, you know, in a lot of ways, because you know, we just had in the co-main event Demetrius Johnson knock out Henry Cejudo, and no one's made Johnson look human really. I mean, he has the loss to Cruz, but that was a bantamweight. I mean, for me, you know, as far as who we're talking about, I mean, Jones and Demetrius Johnson are the two best right now. No one has really made either of them look human at this point, so I have to put both of them in that category. I'm not going to pick one over the other. I'm just, for me, it's they're both still great. You know, Jones won. That's what we have to focus on here. And I think that's sort of the main thing is that, you know, people got to quit worrying about, you know, these spectacular finishes. Anderson Silva had fights in his heyday where he was off a bit, you know, and he still won the fight. So I think we have to look at that and say, you know, at the end of the day, you got the W, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, nice work. You'd think that you're a professional or something with these segues you're throwing out there, Mr. Lynch.
Just, you know, I know how to carry the show.
You know, just keep it moving. Demetrius Johnson, and for the record, we are 100% on the same page. Pound for pound rankings and the discussion of it is an absolute waste of time. And shut up. Do not hit my Twitter out, people, and ask me anything about a pound for pound ranking of anything. Pound for pound, there's weight classes. That's it. That's all. Yeah. That's why we create them. Pound for pound, who's the best in the world? The heaviest guy, because he's big. He's going to beat you up. Anyway, Demetrius Johnson, a small guy. We'll talk about that for a little bit. A real masterful performance. I started the show by talking about DJ just because I wanted to save a little bit of Jones talk for when you got here, but I only see Demetrius Johnson growing in his game and becoming more and more diverse and deadly. If you had told me he was going to win, I mean, he won in the clinch and was really devastating in a clinch game, an aspect of his game that I don't even think about or associate when someone says, hey, what does Mighty Mouse Johnson do well? The clinch game isn't coming out of my mouth until maybe 2-3 minutes into that conversation. You know what I mean, James?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, a couple things about this fight. First off, I think we got to throw this whole credential thing out the window if you're an Olympic wrestler. I think all that stuff, no, but I mean, we look at, like, you know, look at Sarah McMahon when she fought Rousey. Now we're seeing Cejudo, same thing. I think it's great that you have those that background, but it's not the be all and end all in MMA. It's a different ball game when you go into MMA. I think people got to look at that. Second thing we got to look at is the fact that, again, you know, I was joking with Robin when we were watching the fights. You know, Cejudo just beat Chris Carriasso, who's not even in the UFC. You know, for him, it's too much too soon. It's just that division is so thin at this moment. You know, Cejudo in a couple of years, if he would have fought, you know, DJ, been a much different fight. But Cejudo just does not have that MMA experience, and you're fighting one of the guys who, again, like I said, has not looked human in any of his fights. No one's made him, you know, made it a difficult fight for him. I think, you know, you're facing a guy in Johnson that, you know, is bound to have a performance like this. And I think he knew that too. I think he knew that, you know, he's facing a guy in Cejudo that, while he is very good, he's undefeated, you know, you need that loss to kind of, you know, adjust and go forward. You know, when Johnson lost that fight to Dominic Cruz at bantamweight, you know, I think he was only training with Matt Hume, I think once or twice a week. And now he went full time and he kind of went full force. You learn more from your losses than you do from your wins. I mean, everyone knows that. So I feel like in this case, you know, Johnson just, again, was able to kind of showcase what he's made of. And I think he went out there and proved all the doubters wrong. And I also want to point out one other thing. There were a lot of people who picked Henry Cejudo in this fight. And I think, again, people are just overlooking Demetrious Johnson as one of the best fighters in the world. And, you know, I thought Johnson would win the fight, but I didn't think he'd finish like he did. And just shows you how great of a fighter he really is.
Yeah, definitely. What I would be interested, let's just zoom out a little bit about this card. Jon Jones and DJ as a commercial package, you know, having those two title holders and selling them as a combined force, you kind of look at what boxing's doing with Triple G and Chocolatito. You know, you kind of have this heavier weight fighter who really has the name and the big push, and then kind of the hardcore fans, you know, favorite in the co-main event. I would love to see, you know, the UFC to be crafty enough and say, hey, why don't we package these two together?
Absolutely.
You know, feed DJ people. Are they ready or not for their championship fight? Doesn't matter. You fresh meat for the guy. Just keep feeding him new fighters. Watch him get these impressive finishes. You see DJ put in a couple, you know, first, second round KO performances, string 2-3 together. Did he finish? Did he get a KO in his last fight too? Is he already on a 2 streak? But the point being, I don't know. Did he?
No, I'm sure. Who did he fight last? It feels like it was. I'm getting.
Benavidez?
No, he fought Dodson and he won a decision.
Well, Dodson by decision, absolutely right.
Before that, it was Horiguchi, and he beat him. He submitted him in the last minute. And I know that because I was cage side for that, and I had the inside the distance bet, so I was like, yes!
The degenerate in you wants to just scream in press row, like, yes!
Everyone in press row was like, why is this guy? You know, I tried to keep a little bit calm. I think I did one of these. I did, like, you know, one of these because you got to be professional, right, Andrew? You can't go out there and be one of these cheerleading. Just
silently, you know, revel in your victory. Imaginarily count your money, throw it around. No, but what was my point? I think, though, with a couple first-round finishes like this and just more highlight reel fodder, you can really start building something with DJ. I think sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, you know, you would have thought that after he knocked out Benavidez, but that wasn't the case. You know, you saw him go to Canada. I think the problem is Demetrious just isn't one of those guys that is a headliner. I think, like you mentioned, I think that the good strategy there is to do a co-main event, you know, put him on a card where he is, you know, sort of facilitated. Because, you know, if you look at this card, Demetrious sort of stole the show, and that's not something you would have expected if you were putting money on this. You know, it would have been Jones, you figured, or whoever else. But I think that, you know, Johnson really went out there and proved his worth. And I think that, you know, I think the strategy going forward should be the co-main event slot, and don't put him in these headlining fights. It's just not, you know, it's not going to be good business for anyone. And, you know, a lot of people are blaming the Canadian fans, but I think it showed that, you know, when Johnson was headlining, you know, fights on his own, it's still the same sort of number. So, you know, UFC's got to do this guy a favor and let him do the co-main event. Yeah, I think you got to build his brand a little bit. You know my suggestion on it. Do the Triple G Chocolatito package. Speaking of which, did you catch a little bit of the boxing main event today?
I did not. It was all MMA for me, but okay. I assume Triple G went through with flying colors. I would assume because that guy's a killer.
Second round knockout. I think he had 3 knockdowns the entire fight. It was pretty brutal. Chocolatito went to a decision. Definitely worth it if you didn't watch it. I've said this a lot before.
Tomorrow.
I've said this a lot before. If you're an MMA fan. And I know there's a lot of MMA fans who are strict anti-boxing. I'm not the biggest boxing fan in the world. I don't miss a Triple G fight. I really think he is the action-packed fighter of our generation. Go check him out while we have the opportunity. Random notes from 197. Did you like DC in the booth?
I love DC in the booth. I loved the fact that the UFC, put the cameras on the fight on the commentators tonight. I thought that was really good. I would think that after tonight, if I'm the UFC, I consider going to a 3-man booth, going forward, just because it did add a lot to the broadcast. Get former fighters in there, and I think they did this years and years and years ago with Eddie Bravo, and I thought it worked. I never understood why they went away from it. So I would like to see more of that. I think it adds to the broadcast, and they do it in other promotions, right? So, I mean, Bellator's done it, and, I think it's something that they should look into, going forward.
Yep. I said it earlier in the show. I think having an ex-fighter or a current fighter in that spot keeps Rogan in his lane and kind of keeps him on narrative and lets him watch the fight more, and he has a more observant eye, and I think it keeps Goldie at least a little less insane than Goldie normally is. The two fights that opened up the pay-per-view, I give my thoughts on them in detail earlier. I'm sorry, we skipped over Pettis and Barboza. Shit. Pettis and Barboza with the upset of the night. Where you at on this, man? Did you see this coming?
I thought it would be a close fight. To be honest, the outcome wasn't too surprising. I felt like Pettis had more weapons in his arsenal, so to speak, to get the job done, potentially win a decision or knock him out. But Barboza winning a decision is not too surprising. I think Pettis is going toe-to-toe with a really elite striker in that division. The chances of you coming out on top are 50-50 in my opinion. So, Barboza proving again that he doesn't have this weak chin that we saw in the Danny Castillo fight, that we saw in the Donald Cerrone fight. He's really sort of turned his game around. He's not at that elite level yet. We saw that in the Tony Ferguson fight, but he's a guy that is still a threat. And I think with Pettis, man, what do you do? I mean, he changed things up for this camp. He went to Greg Jackson's. Is a move to 45 the answer? I don't know. I just know that, he is, for whatever reason, just not the same guy after the RDA fight, it seems. And it's unfortunate because he was a guy that, people are talking about pound for pound and everything else. He's a guy that just, I don't know, isn't the same. I still like watching him fight, but I don't know where he goes from here. He's still young, but it's tough to lose, what is it, 3 fights in a row now? That's pretty crazy.
Your boy Robin Black would talk about the mental game, the confidence game of a fighter. Did that RDA fight break Anthony Pettis' fight? His style, it exudes confidence. It needs confidence to kind of breathe. He needs to be able to have faith in those shots. When he sees the openings, he needs to know that his hand's quick enough to make what he's able to see happen. And that's worrisome. I think if you're smart and you're in the Pettis camp now, rewind him back. No elite fights, no short notice, no get right back in the cage. Let's take a step back. Let's reevaluate. You're still relatively young. You're no spring chicken, but you're definitely not ancient. Let's rewind the career a little bit. Go back to basics. See what we can do to build your confidence up. Fight a lower-tier guy. Fight 2-3 lower-tier guys, to be frank. And then let's re-engage with the top, 10, top 5 of the division.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what you have to do. I mean, this is a guy that was a former champion. People do know who he is. The Showtime kick is something that is embedded in some casual fans and every hardcore fan. I think you got to preserve that, and you can't just let this guy go to waste and get cut or anything like that. I think you got to kind of groom him a little bit. Go back to the drawing board. I think of a guy like Andrei Arlovsky, where he had a really rough stretch. And then, he was released from the UFC, and, he kind of had some fights where, he was able to kind of build his confidence up again. The UFC, they're going to keep Pettis. They're never going to cut him, but, you kind of do the same sort of thing. You kind of nurture him a little bit and get him back on the winning track. Because, Barboza was a tough fight. I think anyone who wrote Barboza off is a little bit crazy, and I think that, I picked Pettis to win. I'll be completely honest, but I did think that Barboza had a shot, and that's why I didn't bet that fight, because I knew it was going to be pretty competitive. So, it certainly was.
Yeah, it definitely was. I think this is also the coming out party for Edson Barboza. I think he's finally putting it together. So I don't want to, my comments focus mostly on Anthony Pettis and what he's doing wrong, but I really thought that this was him, meaning Edson Barboza, winning by fractions here. He was winning in those timing exchanges and had a better game plan, and maybe was more mentally composed throughout the fight. Moving on to, there were great fights on the pay-per-view. I want to just say that this whole card was well put together, at least in the top 5 fights. I was really entertained by all of them, and I thought there was some high-level talent here. Robert Whittaker taking a 3-round decision over Rafael Natal, unanimous decision victory there. Is there any punch in the world that can put down Sapo Natal?
Well, Tim Kennedy knocked him out. That's why I figured that Whitaker was going to knock him out. But he certainly proved his durability in this fight. He took a lot of really, really big shots, and he was able to stand up. Natal to me is the gatekeeper in that division. I mean, if you can get by a Natal, you're obviously above the crop, so to speak. But if you can't, you're probably in that sort of Natal, Chris Camozzi type territory where you're just, you're hanging in there, but, are you going to go to that next level? So I think, Natal, very durable, but he was not in this fight at all. Whitaker, always a one punch ahead. Whitaker's got to get a bigger opponent at this point. He's a guy that, again, he beat Uriah Hall. Now he beats Natal. In some ways you could call Natal a bit of a step down. Whitaker to me has always been the dark horse in the division. Challenge this guy. He had trouble at 170. He's undefeated at 185. I want to see what he's like against maybe the winner of Musashi and Brunson or something like that to kind of progress him up a little bit and see where he belongs, because there's lots of potential there. I do think that the best is yet to come for him. He's still very young, but again, going out there making Natal a punching bag basically for 3 rounds. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely enjoyable. Fantastic matchmaking suggestion with Musashi against Whitaker. I think that would be a perfect test actually for his technique. Musashi, a real technical fighter, and usually runs away with fights if he has any kind of edge as a fighter, but seems to lose when he's losing to that elite. So that's a really good test to see if you're ready for a title shot. At least in my opinion, I do. Yeah, I value and rank Musashi's abilities quite highly. Opening up the pay-per-view, Yair Rodriguez with a
amazing
best highlight of the quarter. Definitely, it's got to be up there for in the year. You just don't see flying roundhouse kick KOs. It was the left jab that kind of set it up, but good Lord, this was something special.
Yeah, and Robin said it best when I was talking to him. He said on paper, Fili is the better fighter, but Rodriguez, he's got that, that Mexican sort of heritage, that the heart, never gives up, and he just showed another level to his game tonight. For me, I was blown away when Rodriguez beat Charles Rosa. Charles Rosa to me is a very, very, very talented and technical fighter in that division, awesome, and what he did there was sort of the breakup performance for me. Now tonight he took it to another gear. Andre Fili is no slouch. He is a good fighter, and to go out there and knock him out makes a statement, in my opinion. 23 years old. This guy has got so much potential. I'm a big Yair Rodriguez fan, and I would love to see who they match him up with next, because really, highlight reel finish. Let's put that in perspective. But a win over Andre Fili the way he did, that is huge. So it really opens him up for options in that division, and I'm excited. It's nice to see an upcoming prospect, and the UFC's got to be loving this too. Mexican fighter, they go to Mexico every once in a while. If they ever do a fight night there, Yair Rodriguez would be my headliner if I was going to do a fight night card.
Yeah, definitely one of those second-tier Mexico cities. Yair is an ideal Fox Sports 1 headline. I talked earlier about how everyone joked a little bit about the tough finale and the tough Latin America or tough Mexico, whatever the hell they were calling it. And the talent level coming out of that, but we've got some real spectacular fighters, or at least the winners ended up being something a little bit special. So I'll take that out of a tough that's only aired on Fight Pass any day of the week. Andre Fili, still a young guy himself, after rebound from this, even though this was kind of a showcase and all one-way traffic, I don't think he showed himself to be all that out of water here. He was in there for quite a while.
It was competitive, and he got caught. It happens to the best of them. What are his losses? Are what Holloway and Pepe. I mean, let's be honest here. Pepe's
a little.
He's taking a little extra Gatorade, if you know what I mean, in that fight. So I don't really count that as a loss, in my opinion. I think if Andre Fili fought Pepe again, I think he beats him. Holloway, no slouch there. Fili's still a talented guy. He beats most of the guys in that division. But again, if the UFC's smart, they gave him kind of a rebound fight, get the confidence back, and then get back on track. But Fili is still a very dangerous guy, and he'll get better from this, Andrew. He really will. I think losing like that, no fault in that. Again, he was in the fight, just got caught.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of a continuation of the struggles from the Tiva Alpha male members. I think he's one of the few that stayed behind. Let's see how that works out. Let's talk about the undercard. We don't have to break down every single fight in depth here in the undercard, because I was really super pleased with both the results and the talent we had in the upper or in the pay-per-view section, and there wasn't anything too much surprising. There was chalk finishes with the exception of Mr. Walt Harris in the Fight Pass
finally gets his first UFC win.
Yeah, a guy who it's very questionable whether or not Walt Harris is a UFC level fighter. Cody East debuting, got the hype from the Dana White looking for a fight. Continuing the tradition of looking for a fight, fighters not faring so well though. Also, Cody East with a real checkered past and a real interesting history.
Bloody Elbow loved that win. I know that. So
we had a lot of cheering from the media that we don't normally see. Cody East, pretty much an all-around bad guy. I don't really want to comment on that too much, but I thought Walt Harris's performance was really impressive.
Yeah, and it's good to have him win, or any younger heavyweight win, because that division is just so starving for talent. I am excited. I got to do a little plug here. Adam Milstead, who's fighting on the 29th. On that UFC card coming up in Vegas. He's a guy to keep an eye out for. But in general, you don't see a lot of sort of up-and-comers in that division. So the fact that Harris won is a good thing. He's a guy that outside the UFC looks great. For whatever reason, he can never put it together in the octagon. Who knows? This might be the confidence he needs to finally show his true potential. Because, even when he got released from the UFC the first time, he went to Titan FC. He looked great in that fight. I believe it was against DJ Linderman. So, not like Linderman's a world beater, but, at the very least, it's, Harris looked great in that fight. It's nice to see that the UFC does have some options as far as up-and-comers, because really, I can't even name like a heavyweight prospect in the UFC or outside the UFC. So if Harris is winning, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that fights like this are important to prove that there is a such thing as UFC caliber. Even in something like the heavyweight division, where we see a lot of unathletic competition, we see a lot of shit show fights, if I'm being frank. But there is such thing as UFC caliber. You can't be unathletic Cody East coming in there not looking like he's in good shape, looking a little chubby, and he was outclassed, and I think that's an important thing to remind people out there. You can see these people out in regional competition, and they look good at heavyweight, and you think, why isn't the UFC out there signing guys? Well, those guys really aren't ready, and I think that's what the case was here. Who else impressed you on the prelim card in general? If you could pick a fight that you were like, damn, this was the fight, and I really. It stuck with me after such a fantastic pay-per-view.
Okay, well, this is going to kind of surprise you a little bit, just because he didn't end up winning. But I thought Dominic Steele looked pretty good in that fight with Robert. It's Roberts, right? Danny Roberts.
Yeah, Danny Roberts.
Yeah, I'm getting them mixed up a little bit, but no. Steele, he held his own, and Roberts won the fight, but it was not an easy fight for him. And for a minus whatever it was, almost 300, 400 favorite, Roberts certainly didn't look like it, and it wasn't a case of Roberts not being good. I think Steele just brought the fight to him, and it was funny. I was sitting there watching the fight, and I thought, Steele's going to gas out hard in the later rounds. And he hung in there. He got some takedowns and stuff. And Dominic Steele's a guy that really impressed me. For coming as far as he did. UFC debut was completely forgettable. He got knocked out in a couple of seconds or whatever. And then he comes back, gets the win in Korea, and he comes out here and he put up a good fight. So I thought he did well. I thought that the theme for the preliminary card was kind of fighting safe. Kevin Lee getting the unanimous decision. I think he just needed to get back on the winning track. He did that. People are expecting another highlight reel performance. Escudero's a tough guy. You're not going to do that against anyone. And Carla Esparza, after the beating she took against Joanna and Jacek, I sort of expected this type of performance for her. She just did what she had to do to win. I don't know where her head's at even for her next fight, but she did what she had to do to win. And I think it was just a case of a lot of people just getting the wins they needed to because they came off losses, and that's sort of that. But I thought for me, sort of Dominic Steele was sort of the guy that I was sort of surprised by. And, I hope the UFC keeps him around because I thought he put up a good fight. Yeah,
definitely. How did you end up scoring that fight, the Dominic Steele fight?
I did have Danny Roberts up actually all I think it was all 3 rounds. I got to think back actually. Maybe Steele stole one of the rounds. I got to remember. Maybe it was like round 1 actually. Maybe Steele took. I'm trying to remember. So maybe it was a 29-28.
I did. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say. I now that I'm thinking back, I think I actually did give Steele the first round. I didn't end up tweeting it out, so there's no I can't exactly remember what I had it, but I think I remember. I remember Roberts winning, but I remember not thinking like. It was anything convincing.
Don't lie to me, James Lynch. You're a notorious. No, I'm joking. Because you said I didn't tweet out the score or anything. I won't hold you to it. We don't
Yeah,
need.
I'd be nervous there for a second. I was like, did I tweet something I don't remember tweeting? But no,
citation, James Lynch. You need it, or you can't claim what's going on. I gave him the first round, and I gave Dominic Steele the third round. I know that he was outstruck in the third round a little bit, but he pressed the action and held him against the cage for a good 3.5 minutes of that third round. At least I think. A lot of fights happen tonight, but I could swear that he was in control for a good part of that third round, and that went a long way because I thought the exchanges were, decently even, but the edge clearly went to Roberts. I don't mind the 29-28 for Roberts. A bit of controversy, but I'm not losing sleep over it. Mr. Lynch, Carlos Esparza against Juliana Lima, you talked about it as much as I want to talk about it. That fight was dull.
Yeah.
Sergio Pettis, he took his victory.
Yeah, Canadian guy. Yeah, Clades brought it. The big thing for me was just the speed factor. Clades is a bit older. Pettis, I thought, showed some good speed in that fight, kind of just outworked Clades a little bit there. But Clades is always game. He's always going to make it a tough fight. And, Pettis got the win, and that's what he needs to do. And I think that, the time at Jackson's has helped him out. And I think the loss to, Benoit a couple fights ago is good for him too. And I think, there's still some room for growth here. But, Clades is a solid win. Clades has beat guys that he wasn't supposed to. And, Pettis went out there and did what he had to do. So, good on him.
Yep, definitely. Just to kind of wrap things up and clear the board, as they say, James Vick wins a unanimous decision victory over Galego Franca. Franca knocked him down early.
Yeah.
James Vick had to find his way through some adversity and ended up taking the second and the third round here. Good on Vic. Were you very impressed by him?
I was. I think Franca took him down early, and I think Vic looked very composed. It seemed like he was not worried at all about being taken down. And I think once he got it on the feet, that's just sort of where he took over. And I thought, Vic's a guy that again is slowly making his way up that division. I think he's very impressed. And I got to mention quickly our buddy there, Daniel Levy, must have been having a blast in Vegas, seeing his pal James Vick get the win there. So I thought that was kind of cool too. But yeah, Vic. I've always liked James Vick. I think he's a guy that, again, relatively young, lots of ceiling. I'm excited to see what's next for him because he's a guy that just keeps winning and doing it kind of quietly too.
Yeah, a guy who was impressive, I think, back on the
Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, thank you. I was guessing that it was tough line. There was a little bit of a guess in me. You felt the unsurety.
I did.
Once you start talking Ultimate Fighter, I'm like, shit. Was he on which Ultimate Fighter was it?
I actually forgot he was on the Ultimate Fighter, but I only remember that because of the broadcast. Because there's a couple Ultimate Fighters where I kind of half-assed watched it, and I'm like, oh yeah, he was on the show. That's right. Yeah. So
a couple that you half-assed watched.
Yeah. The couple of the recent ones, actually, I will be honest. I watched the entire premiere that just took place this past Thursday because there was a little bit of interest there for me because they had the Canadian, the two Canadians. They had the Abdul guy from Montreal who I'd never heard of, and then Alyssa Crane, who I am familiar with because she trains out at a Complete with a lot of the other high level fighters like Mitch Clark and Sheldon Westcott. So that was even though she didn't win, it was cool to see that. And Eric Spicely, guy I've interviewed a couple times, he looked great on the Ultimate Fighter, so that was kind of cool to see as well.
Well, I'll know who to go to for updates on what's happening at Tough because I will not be watching, ladies and gentlefolk. All right. Clint Hester got bullied in his fight against Marcos Rodrigo de Lima. De Lima, one of these tough Brazil guys, just kind of stuck around and made a career for himself in the UFC. Are we saying Clint Hester, pack it up, take your ball and go home? Is it that time for him?
He strikes me as a World Series of Fighting type guy. I think he's going to end up there. I don't know what it is. I just feel like he'll go there. I don't think he'll go to Titan or Bellator. I think he goes to World Series of Fighting. I don't know why. I just got a feeling about that.
He's got a good nickname. He's got a good look. Does he got a connection to Ali Abdelaziz? Because then you're good, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, they seem to get the guys you don't think they're going to get. So
text his wife. I hear his wife's making the business decisions.
What's that?
I said text Ali's wife. I hear she's making the decisions.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, high level decisions right
there.
Shout
out to Carlin Bardsley who would talk our ear off about this for another hour.
That's right. Yeah,
we were here. Okay, so let's put a bow on 197 here. We talked about all the fights. Pretend you're Joe Silva. Pretend you're handing out big fat stacks of $50,000. Who's the fight of the night for you here, man?
I might be going off the board a little bit here. For me, it was Roberts and Steele. I felt like that was really the fight for me that sort of stole the show. People might disagree with me here, but I just felt the fact that Steele was really counted out and he made it a fight. For me, that was fight of the night. And both guys, even till the final bell, really kind of gave it their all. So that is my fight of the night.
My fight of the night's going to go to Edson Barboza against Anthony Pettis. I also had Dominic Steele and Danny Roberts marked, so a tip of the cap to you, my good man. But I just think that there was a lot of high-level technique involved in that, and I thought if you're not going to give them a fight of the night, I think a performance of the night deserves to go to Edson Barboza, because there's just like some really high-level Muay Thai happening there, and I think that this was a masterful performance, not just by Barboza, but by his whole camp. John Henry, the whole team there in Jersey, deserve a little bit of salute there. Your finish of the night. Give out 2 performance of the night bonuses, if you would, Mr. Lynch.
Well, Yair Rodriguez has to be there. I'll go him, and I'll go Demetrius Johnson.
Shit, you stole it from me, you handsome Canadian devil. Mine go up to Yair Rodriguez and Demetrius Johnson as well. I think those are no-brainers. Anything else you want to comment on for the whole card in general? Any takeaways?
I thought it was a good card. It wasn't one of those cards that you kind of go like, man, that UFC 197 really. When I think of MMA, I think of, it was kind of a par for the course card. I'm happy for Demetrius Johnson that he got the win. I think he's a very underappreciated champion. And I think Yair Rodriguez, again, stepping into the limelight and having a good performance. And same with Edson Barboza. So I think there were a lot of positives. And then there's some fighters that really have to look in the mirror and, look at their career, like Anthony Pettis. It's unfortunate not everyone can win. But Pettis is a guy, I think, he's got some good people around him. The thing with Pettis is he's with good people. I mean, he can only go up from here. Still relatively young. He's not as young as his brother and all that, but he's a guy that I think will grow from this, and I'll be curious to see what his next move is and how the UFC kind of handles this too, right? So, I think lots of interesting stuff taken away from this card.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some interesting takeaways. If you had to give a letter grade, American style, A to F, on the card in general, what are you putting on it?
I'll give it a solid college B. I'll give it a B. It didn't really blow me away by any means. But again, the performances by Rodriguez, Barboza, Johnson, I think for me was enough to give it a solid grade. But I can't go A, Andrew. I really can't. It's just, an A for me is, I'm going to go sit and watch the entire event again tomorrow. Don't really need to do that. For me, I'll check out the Rodriguez, Zombie Prophet. If he's got a gif of that or something, I'll go check it out. Yeah. But I'll check that out. But other than that, I don't need to watch the Jones fight again. He won. He did what he had to do. For me, I don't need to check out the rest of the card. I saw what I saw. I'm ready to move on to bigger and better things like UFC 198.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited for cards to come. This wasn't a legendary moment. We almost had the opportunity for this to kind of be a historic fight, maybe with a really, flashy Jones KO. We could have rescued something out here. Yeah. I'm firmly in a B- territory for the fight. Some really good stuff, and no question that this could float into a B range. It was good, and like I said, I really did enjoy the preliminary card. But there just wasn't a moment beyond the Mighty Mouse KO for me that was super impactful and just one of those holy shit I love MMA moments and got my blood really going. So it falls into a B- for me, and that is it. We are done discussing UFC 197. I want to take a second and thank, well, first of all, let's take a second and thank Mrs. Lynch out there for fantastic driving skills. Golf clap and a salute to you, ma'am. You are a hero amongst Canadian women. But mostly we want to thank my guest tonight, Mr. James Lynch. Thanks for coming on the program. Always love having your input. It's fantastic to have such a professional on this show to clean our fucking act up a little bit. Why don't you tell the people out there where they can find you, like they don't already know, but why don't you remind them what you got going on this upcoming week and for the cards coming up in the future.
All right, well, best way to get a hold of me, Twitter, @LynchOnSports. It's all one word. You can check out all my interviews, youtube.com/LynchOnSports. I keep it easy for the audience out there. Don't want to make things too complicated. Tomorrow, Parting Shot Podcast. We got a great show. We got Angela Lee, not to be confused for the Angela Lee from Invicta. This is the Angela Lee from one championship. 19 years old, a pretty big star over there, undefeated. So check out that interview. We also got an interview with Dwayne Finley, who's the new senior editor for Flow Combat, doing some great stuff over there. So definitely check that out. And then our last interview is actually with James Terry. Now, if that name sounds familiar, he fought in Strikeforce, fought in Bellator. But the coolest thing about it is, if you guys listen to my podcast, at the very beginning of the podcast, there's a quote from a guy who's going, "I want to call out Ronnie from Jersey Shore." It's James Terry. So I talked to him all about that call out of Ronnie from Jersey Shore. So it was actually pretty awesome. And he talked all about it and he's got a fight coming up on April 30th. But the main thing I wanted to talk about, obviously, with him was the Ronnie call out. And if Ronnie actually got in touch with him, apparently, spoiler alert, apparently Ronnie is aware of the call out when it happened. This was back in 2011, but apparently there was no bad blood or anything. But yeah, so great show tomorrow. Carlin Bardsley and I always bringing the goods. And then, of course, my interviews, MMA Oddsbreaker, just check them out there. Lots of stuff coming up this week. I think I got like 4 or 5 interviews coming out. So guys, just stay tuned. And it's always a pleasure being on this show, Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Kid, Mr. Clown Kid. I appreciate the time. Again, apologies for my lateness, but I'm glad I was able to make it. And got to have you back on Parting Shot very soon. So I appreciate the time.
Yeah. We'll definitely link up in the future. Legendary.
Actually, sorry, I was going to say, actually, speaking of linking up, I assume you're going to UFC New York, I would imagine, in November.
Oh, yes, there are plans in the works. There will be no Before the Bald Man Speaks that week, guys. I will be blackout drunk at Madison Square Garden for sure.
Okay, well, again, nothing's set in stone, but my plan is I'm probably going to end up going to that card. So I will perhaps get to finally meet the one and only Clown Kid. So even if you're blackout drunk, I'll give you some hangover medication or something.
No, we will. I will show you around this beautiful city. Definitely hit me up on the DM there, Mr. Lynch. We will take care of you Canadians. Yeah. You get across the border, and we got you from there. No problem. Thanks again for coming on the show, James. Really appreciate it. I want to thank all the viewers out there for sticking in and staying with us. The show's going a little later than it normally does. Not too late. I did want to mention on a really somber note. I didn't want to mention it at the beginning of the show because I tried to keep the show lighthearted. But this week we were notified of the passing of Mike James. Mike James was a guest on this show months and months ago. A man who frankly struggled with life and struggled with addiction and had a lot of private demons that we weren't necessarily aware of. I would just implore people who are fans of this show and people who interact with me on Twitter and in this little MMA community that we have kind of through Twitter, to take this as a moment and as a second to realize that maybe we should recognize that there are lives that are being led outside of what we see on Twitter, and that there are struggles that people are carrying, and maybe we can speak to each other and deal with each other in a more compassionate way. I was guilty of it myself. I fall into cynicism, I fall into snark, and I fall into combativeness probably too easily. And I think instances like this that happen, and frankly tragedies like this that happen, should be a moment for us to reevaluate our own behaviors and recognize kind of what we have going on good in our lives, and also recognize where we can be better as people. But mostly, my deepest condolences and really just extreme sadness that this happened. So my thoughts go out to his family and any of his friends and anyone who grieved for Mr. Mike there. I'll miss him as much as he was a controversial and sometimes ignorant and sorry.
Yeah. No. I know what you're trying to say, and I'm just going to add, two quick things that kind of I take away from it as well. I wrote a quick thing in my news and notes this week about Mike's passing, and Mike was always a great guy to me. I know some people didn't think too fondly of him, but at the end of the day, nobody wants to lose a son or a friend or anything like that. And I send my deepest condolences to this family. But two things I think you can take away from the situation. Number one, there's more to life than Twitter and more to life than abuse and all that stuff. Go enjoy life. Don't worry so much. Don't, make Twitter your life, because it can be very easily kind of suck you in there. And number two is, just the fact that I think, you look at a situation like this, you can reach out for help if you ever have any issues. I'm a guy that, you send me a message, I'll gladly talk to you. Everyone's got their own struggles, big or small, but my one thing is, if I would have known that Mike was dealing with this, I would have helped, a bit more. And I didn't know. And, it's one of those things. I can't beat myself up about it, but, I would have been there for him if he would have, wanted to talk or anything like that. And I don't know if anything would have been different, but at least I wish I could have been able to help more and, kind of help this guy out. Because again, to me, he was a great guy, and, we miss him. It's unfortunate. He was a member of the Oddsbreaker family, and it's unfortunate. But I think, like I said, biggest thing here, just again, if you ever feeling down or anything, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. I think a lot of us are, really good guys. And second thing is, just separate your life. Turn off Twitter, turn off your phone some nights, and just go out and enjoy life. So.
Yeah, please. It definitely go out there and have relationships with human beings outside of your Twitter.
People don't, though, Andrew. You realize this? I mean, there's people like tweeting about certain things at odd hours in the morning, and it's like, do you have friends? Do you go on dates? Do you go do these things? Like, even for me, it's difficult to kind of balance, everything. But you got to make it work, and you got to realize that there is a life out there, and don't take everything so damn seriously. It's just, it is what it is. Like Ferris Bueller says.
That is the way to end it. Don't take things so damn seriously. But we dedicate this episode of the show to the memory of Mike James. And once again, my heartfelt condolences to him and his family. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you again, Mr. James Lynch, you handsome Canadian devil. Who are we holding over there?
That's my cat, Fuji. I thought he'd make an appearance. Sometimes he makes it in my interviews. Sometimes he'll hang out in the back, but I figured I'd get him front and center here. So
cats are aliens, man.
This is
he knows he's on camera.
Yeah. Look, he's shying away now. All right, I'll put him down.
Yeah. You shouted them out by first name. That's why.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's all confused.
Put him on blast on the internet. Now he's going to have cat crazy people following him, looking for him on Twitter and Instagram.
Exactly, but he should know. He shouldn't take the abuse personally.
Definitely not. All right, guys. All right, man. We're wrapping up here for Before the Baldman Speaks, episode 36, covering UFC 197. We'll see, guys. I believe there's a card next week. If there isn't, we'll have a week off. Whatever. Who knows what's happening. James Lynch, Andrew Lawrence here. Take it easy, people.